tenemos la fortuna de hablar con una experta acerca de cómo vamos a redefinir el futuro del cáncer de ovario HRD positivo. Sabemos que hay nuevos datos muy interesantes en no solamente saber si hay mutaciones de BRCA, sino el tipo de mutación, los dominios nos pueden marcar o predecir qué tan respondedoras van a ser a los inhibidores de PARP más antiangiogénicos. También nuevos datos acerca del GIS, en qué pacientes realmente estos biomarcadores van a complementar los perfiles clínicos que hemos definido como alto o bajo riesgo para ayudarnos a tomar decisiones. Súper famoso en toda la oncología, CTA circulante tumoral. ¿Será que esto va a ser algo que nos va a servir para tomar decisiones sobre el tiempo de duración del mantenimiento? Y en todas nuestras pacientes que recaen, que sabemos que siempre vamos a tener este grupo de pacientes que vamos a utilizar como opciones de tratamiento, muchas cosas acerca de IPARPs después de IPARPs. Entonces, pues nada, quiero invitar al escenario a la doctora Isabel Rey Cocard. Ella es presidente de la red ENGOT, expresidente de Gineco, profesora de oncología médica en la Universidad Claude Bernard de Lyon, oncólogo médico en el Centro Regional Integral del Cáncer de Lyon Bernard, investigadora.
Hello everyone. So my pleasure to be with you today. We have 1 hour to discuss about the first line management of advanced ovarian cancer, and more particularly, we will focus on the HRD positive population in this disease. Right now, it is my disclosure. And before to start about thinking about maintenance therapy, I would like to remember some new data we have right now considering the use of chemotherapy and perhaps the provocative question about the use of weekly paclitaxel in this setting. As you can remember, we have our ESMO guidelines updates with the ASEAN team, considering that the more important topic we have to discuss for the first line setting is to speak about testing, surgery, chemotherapy, and maintenance treatments. If we want to go back to our GCIG recommendation 3 years ago, we continue to consider that 6 cycles of chemotherapy, including carboplatin and paclitaxel every 3 weeks, is our backbone standard of care. However, as you have seen in ESGO 2023 and more recently in Berlin, we have the ICON 8B, who report that using weekly paclitaxel in combination with carboplatin AUC 5 or 6 seems to improve the progression-free survival and also the overall survival in a particular population where we have seen that the majority were not receiving upfront surgery, but neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And effectively, if you look at the recent results report at ESMO, we see in this population who just received chemotherapy and BEV, there is no PARP in this clinical trial and no stratification on BRCA, but we see an improvement in terms of overall survival, progression-free survival, but also interval debulking surgery with no residual disease, when we are combining BEV and weekly paclitaxel in this upfront management, which can be discussed later. So now coming back to the maintenance treatment, the big question we have now is which one, considering we have several options. What could be the impact of the maintenance therapy on the next line treatment, and what can be the future for our patients? If we go back to the GCIG recommendation, we have to consider maintenance therapy for all of our patients. And perhaps this is something that you disagree. Because I know that, for example, in US, some clinicians consider that the PFS we observe in the clinical trial are not enough to change the practice considering maintenance treatment. However, I would like to show you some recent data. And you know we have at the ESGO level a big database where we have looked at the quality of the surgery but also the systemic therapy we are used to predict the PFS of our patients. And also we have seen that upfront surgery with no residual disease continue to be the most efficient treatment for our patient. When we look at the data considering maintenance therapy, we see better PFS, whatever is the maintenance therapy compared to nothing. And when you look at the gradient of efficacy, we see better activity when we are using PARP, and the most appealing maintenance therapy in this retrospective analysis continue to be BEV plus PARP inhibitor, which is quite encouraging for our patients. So now we have considered that maintenance treatment is our standard of care. We have to remember why we decide to move in this way. The point is that when we are using only chemotherapy, the median PFS of our patient is less than 1 year. That means that more than 50% of our patients also receive strong surgery, platinum-based chemotherapy progress very early. And the idea of the maintenance therapy is to continue to target the minimal residual disease. Also, the surgeon did not see anything. Also, the CT scan did not see anything. We know that there is some disease somewhere, and we need to try to work on that. And the first trial where we can see some benefit was not prolonging chemotherapy, because all of these trials were negative. The first trial is using BEV in combination with chemotherapy with a maintenance phase of 15 months. And 2 trials make the demonstration that using BEV in combination and following chemotherapy improve the PFS. We are using more recently the GOG regimen. Why? Because it is where we have strong data in the advanced disease. And when you look at the most recent data we have, using RECIST criteria to explore PFS, we see that the other ratio, adding BEV to chemotherapy, is 0.62, which means not so bad considering BEV. When we look in the detail of the subgroup analysis, we don't see overall survival benefit adding BEV to chemotherapy in the ITT population. We see overall survival in the stage 4 disease. And when we look at the analysis, the subgroup analysis looking to the molecular subtype, we see that the magnitude of the bevacizumab is much higher in the BRCA wild-type population. However, when we look at the p-value, we don't see that the bevacizumab impact on the mutation. That means that bevacizumab is working if the patient have BRCA mutation or not, which is something important to remember because sometimes we are speaking differently considering the use of BEV. Now, what's happened? The PARP inhibitor were coming in the first-line setting with several large phase 3 reporting activity in all these clinical trials. But we see immediately, looking to the other ratio, but also the median PFS benefit, that this class of treatment are particularly interesting in the BRCA mutated and the HRD positive population. And it is why today we will focus on the HRD positive population. So what was the big lesion we have considering this big phase 3? And we will focus on the PAOLA-1 data. As you can imagine, I well known this clinical trial. Considering the role of the HRD test, we have the BRCA mutation, considering of the impact of the BEV in the BRCA mutated population, but also in the HRD positive population. What could be the other clinical factor we have to use to consider our maintenance sequence? And what is the consequence of the use of PARP inhibitor in the first line in the next subsequent treatment? So why we need an HRD test for all our high-grade ovarian cancer patients? Because it is a prognostic factor. It is very clear when you look at the control arm of the PRIMA, ATHENA, and PAOLA-1. where there is no PARP, we see a difference in terms of PFS, looking to the HRD positive versus HRD negative. And also this test is able to reveal in the first line setting the best candidate for PARP inhibitor. And we see exactly the same in all the different clinical trials. However, we have to be careful when we are speaking about an HRD test. It's not an HRR panel of looking to the homologous recombination deficiency gene. Why I'm telling you that? First, because when you look at this homologous recombination deficiency gene beyond BRCA, the number of patients is very small. It's like 7% in the PAOLA-1 regimen. And when we look at the results, considering the mutation in this gene beyond BRCA versus the HRD test, we see something very clear. The mutation in the gene did not reveal sensitivity to PARP compared to a strong HRD test positive. And effectively, if you look to the HRD score of each mutation, you see a complete different picture. For example, PALB2, RAD51 always have an HRD score high compared to other genes, as we can see for ATM, where we don't see an HRD score high. And that means that when we are speaking about an HRD test, we need to use something already validated. And we have strong data now with several commercial but also academic HRD tests where we have validated the strong results in the PAOLA-1 data. Now, there is something open where intelligence artificial seems to be something very interesting. However, again, you have to be careful. Right now, we try to validate this kind of deep learning to try to avoid the use of an HRD test. And unfortunately, until now, we were not able to consider that what we have in terms of tools is enough to consider as a validated test. That means that in the future, we need to continue to work on artificial intelligence to provide a biomarker efficient to detect the best candidate to PARP, but right now it's not our routine practice. There is also something important is to consider the long follow-up. And particularly when we look to the HRD positive population, we realize with PAOLA-1 that now we can tell to our patients that 50% of them with an HRD test positive receiving BEV plus olaparib did not progress after 5 years, which is something we never seen before. 50% of our patients did not progress after 5 years. Perhaps these patients are cured. And this is something that we are very proud and very happy to say to our patients. And this is also an important topic when we consider the progression-free survival compared to overall survival. Some authorities consider that overall survival is really much more important than PFS, and they are right. But for the patient, when we look at what's happened in PAOLA-1 at the time of the progressive disease, also it's just on the CT scan, no symptom, we immediately see a huge decrease of the quality of life of our patient. That means that prolonging progression-free survival, it's an important topic for our patient, not only for a clinical trial. And there is also something we realize in PAOLA-1, I just want to bring you to your attention, is that we have to be careful with the C125 follow-up. We use C125 since long time to follow our patient. However, using PARP inhibitor, and particularly in the HRD positive population, we realize that C125 can lose some sensitivity. And we have 30% of our patients where the progression of the disease is observed on the CT scan much more than on the biomarker follow-up. And it is important because you know that now we can use surgery in the relapse setting. So that means that looking to the CT scan is important if we want to identify the best candidate for surgery in the relapse setting. Now moving to the BRCA mutated population, we have 3 PARP inhibitors available right now, at least in several countries. We have the olaparib with SOLO-1, we have niraparib with PRIMA, and we have rucaparib with ATHENA, at least in Europe. And we have also the combination of olaparib plus BEV. And so the question is why we need to have BEV in this population. Unfortunately, it's very complex to answer to this question right now because we don't have direct comparison. There is no PARP inhibitor alone in the PAOLA-1 clinical trial. What we can say is that we have benefit in all the clinical trial considering PFS, and more recently, SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1 report positive results in this population also for the overall survival. That means that the benefit in this population is particularly right. And when you compare the SOLO-1 and the PAOLA-1 data, the other ratio is quite similar in both clinical trials. However, I would like to insist on 2 topics. First, the population included in PAOLA-1 is not exactly the same as in the SOLO-1. We have more poor prognostic disease, considering interval debulking surgery, residual disease, stage 4, partial response. And interestingly, when you look at the median PFS of the control arm, we have a little bit more than 1 year with a placebo versus 22 months using BEV in this population. That means that possibly BEV can bring some benefit in this population. We try to do what we call a population-adjusted comparison with SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1 using the same PARP, which is quite easy, to try to estimate what could be the benefit to add BEV in this population. And what we see with this population-adjusted comparison is that effectively BEV brings some benefit in this population. The other ratio is 0.7. That means that we decrease the risk of relapse of 30%. Also, it's not another ratio of 0.5. It could be some interesting benefit for some patient. And the question is, which patient? Right now, we don't know. What we can observe is that when we look at the patient in partial response at the end of the chemotherapy, we see clearly that 60% of the patients bring a complete response when we have the combination of BEV and PARP versus only 30% when we have olaparib alone. It could be something interesting. We try also to move deeper in the biology, and we look at what's happened considering BRCA1 versus BRCA2. And as you can see, when we look at the SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1, if we see the same other ratio for PAOLA-1 in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 mutation, we see not exactly the same when we are using olaparib alone in SOLO-1. So perhaps the BRCA1 mutation can have more benefit to have BEV in this group of population. We move deeper, not only looking to the BRCA1 versus BRCA2, we also look at the type of the mutation and the localization of the mutation. And we see effectively that also we see a benefit in all of the patients. The magnitude of the benefit seems to be a little bit different, looking to the type of the mutation and the localization of the mutation. We can elaborate on that later, but it is something interesting we can use in the multidisciplinary tumor board. Considering the HRD positive BRCA wild type population, again, we have access to niraparib, rucaparib, and olaparib plus bevacizumab in this group of patients. So the question is how we will manage to decide about our maintenance therapy. And when we look at the different clinical trials, we see an activity with 2 Kaplan-Meier curves very splitting since the beginning. The other ratio is between 0.440 to 0.458, looking to the different PARP inhibitor. And considering the median PFS is 28 months for the combination, compared to close to 20 months with PRIMA, and compared to 20 months for ATHENA mono. However, you have to remember that the population included in these different clinical trials are not exactly the same, and the PRIMA population include a poor prognostic disease population, also very sensitive to platinum in this clinical trial. So if we try to make some comparison, and I know that is always quite complex, in the PAOLA-1 population, we try to look at the higher risk population, which is the PRIMA population. And as you can see, the other ratio is quite similar in both clinical trials. The difference is looking to the median PFS, where we have more than 30 months with the combination compared to only 20 months with the niraparib alone. And this is the publication developed also a population-adjusted comparison using propensity score, where we see that effectively the combination seems to do better than the PARP inhibitor alone, considering higher risk group in the PAOLA-1 versus PRIMA population. However, if we want to make the demonstration, we need to have clear randomized prospective trial to do that, and we have ongoing two trials. So what could be the other factor to include in the decision considering the data we have? First, do we consider that we have clear synergy between BEV and PARP inhibitor? In the preclinical model we have strong data considering that anti-angiogenic can bring some BRCA profile to our tumor cell, and we know also that PARP inhibitor can have some anti-angiogenic agent. But in the clinical data, the only data we have are in the relapse setting, where in the AVANOVA trial, in the LIU trial, we explore adding BEV to PARP inhibitor versus PARP inhibitor. And what we see is that we see more activity in the HRD BRCA wild type to add the combination compared to the PARP inhibitor monotherapy, but it is in the relapse setting. Considering long-term follow-up is also something very important. And effectively, we see in all the three trials, PAOLA-1, PRIMA, and ATHENA, that the long-term follow-up continue to bring a positive result, particularly in the HRD positive population. And if we look in the detail, for example, looking to the PAOLA-1, the PFS2 analysis, which is the combination of the PFS1 and the activity of the first subsequent therapy, we see some benefit in the ITT population, which is the statistical design, but more importantly, in the BRCA mutated and in the HRD positive BRCA wild type population. However, we don't see a benefit in the HRD negative population, as we have seen in the PFS analysis. And what it is interesting with this data is that when we see PFS2 benefit, we have some chance to see overall survival benefit. And effectively, we report 2 years after in the BRCA mutated population, but also in the HRD positive BRCA wild type, positive benefit for overall survival with this combination. Also, more than 50% of the patients in the control arm receive a PARP inhibitor at the time of the relapse. Considering the overall survival, it is the HRD positive population, including BRCA and HRD non-BRCA, and you see that at 5 years, 65% of the patients were alive compared to 48 in the BEV monotherapy arm. And as I mentioned before, more than 50% of these patients receive a PARP inhibitor in the relapse setting. If we move to the PRIMA data, unfortunately, and we were very surprised, we don't see overall survival in this group of patients, in the overall, but also in the HRD population, and more surprisingly, not also in the BRCA mutated population. There is several data to consider why we did not observe an overall survival benefit, including crossover, but also the particular poor prognostic disease, the progression during PARP, the use of BEV in the PAOLA-1 trial, considering the results we have, and probably several other factors, including the use of BEV in the relapse setting and the access to surgery, which is much more important in PRIMA compared to PAOLA-1. What about the other factor considering FIGO stage residual disease? We observe in PAOLA-1 something very interesting, looking to using targeted treatment we don't see with bevacizumab, is the role of the upfront surgery with no residual disease. It is the place where the hazard ratio to promote the activity of PARP inhibitor is the most important. As perhaps using a complete upfront surgery can be able to decrease the chance of clonal resistance to PARP inhibitor. And this is something where we are very surprised, because when we look at the higher risk group versus lower risk group, for the PFS analysis, but also for the overall analysis, you see that the hazard ratio is clearly in favor of the upfront surgery, no residual disease, using the combination compared to BEV use. And the other ratio for PFS is 0.40 in the higher risk group versus less than 0.20 in the lower risk group. That means that 80% of the patients did not progress with PARP inhibitor and BEV in this group of patients, and we continue to see an overall survival in this population. Also, again, a majority of the patients in the control arm can be able to have access to PARP inhibitor in both groups of patients. Now, do we have to consider that the response to chemotherapy is a good biomarker to predict the magnitude of the benefits of PARP inhibitor as a maintenance therapy? Is not so easy. You're right, in the relapse setting, you remember that we don't need to have an HRD test. Why? Because the sensitivity to platinum demonstrates the capability to identify the best candidate to PARP. It is the same in the first-line setting. We are not sure. When we look at the RECIST criteria, complete response and partial response, we have some data, but unfortunately the data are not the same in the different clinical trials. Upfront surgery versus interval debulking surgery, perhaps, but interval debulking surgery bring benefit to have maintenance with PARP. KELIM score, you will see the VELIA data. And I would like just to mention something about the HRD score level to bring to your attention. Considering the sensitivity and the safety profile, we know that the compliance to treatment is always very important to bring a strong activity of our drug. And we have different profile in terms of safety, so it's always good to consider if we want to define the best safety for our patient, looking to what could be the most typical and side effect complex for our patient. There is something I would like also to mention, is that when we have to stop the treatment for side effect, and this is something that we see different in the different clinical trial, this is something that perhaps we can decrease the dose intensity of the treatment, and decreasing the dose intensity can be something important when we want to bring a huge magnitude of benefit for our patients. Now, if we want to close on the first-line setting, we have now strong evidence with SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1 to consider that we can bring overall survival benefit adding PARP inhibitor for BRCA-mutated population and HRD-positive population alone or in combination with BEV. The question who remain important is the role of BEV for the patient who receive upfront surgery with no residual disease, and we have the Nirvana trial who asked this question ongoing, and I hope we will be able to finalize the results in the future. We continue to have some hesitation using the combination versus the monotherapy in the HRD positive population, and for sure the overall survival we have are strongest to consider the combination, but we can debate on that. And again, the AGO trial will be helpful to confirm the combination versus the monotherapy in the future. But there is also something we need to consider is the similar effect of PARP inhibitor in all BRCA-mutated population. And honestly, we have 19 BRCA-mutated patients in PAOLA-1 who did not bring benefit with olaparib, and all these patients have an HRD test negative, which is something we can discuss. And finally, we have to remember this HRD negative population where we don't know exactly what is the current role of the PARP inhibitor. But there is also something that we need to consider in the first-line setting is to anticipate the relapse. And we have seen some data in PAOLA-1 subgroup analysis, which is interesting to consider when a PARP inhibitor is used in the first line. Right now, when the patient progresses, we have to consider if the patient received PARP alone before, if they receive BEV alone, and in the HRD positive population, I think that there is no patient, and what's happened for the patient received the combination. And we have some data with the MITO16 who report that BEV after BEV is working. We have another ratio of 0.51 adding BEV after BEV. And what it is interesting in this clinical trial is we don't see a difference if the patient progresses during BEV or after BEV. That means that we have a benefit whatever is the progression under or after. However, with this clinical trial, we don't see overall survival benefit with BEV after BEV compared not to reintroduce BEV, so the question remains open. What we see is that we increase the response rate for our patient, adding BEV again to the chemotherapy, which is something that we need to take into consideration when we want to decide about the second-line treatment. There is also something interesting we have seen in PAOLA-1 when we look at the first subsequent therapy, particularly platinum-based chemotherapy, we see two important information. First, the HRD test did not predict in the relapse setting the activity of the platinum-based chemotherapy. We already know that, but it was again reported in the PAOLA-1. Also, we use PARP in the first-line setting. And the second important observation we have published in Annals of Oncology is that the patient who progressed during PARP seems to have less activity of the platinum-based chemotherapy compared to the patient who did not receive PARP in the first line or progress after PARP. And in this group of patients, we see exactly the same activity if they did not receive PARP before. That means that progression during PARP is something that we need to avoid. We need to use everything we can to be sure that our patient did not progress during PARP, insisting on the compliance during treatment, insisting on the upfront surgery, quality of the surgery, and perhaps considering the combination to be sure that the patient did not progress. And effectively, the response rate to the platinum-based chemotherapy is only 30%, which is better than the monotherapy. So continue to consider the combination, but it is less efficient than if the patient progressed after PARP, 53%, or did not receive PARP, 63%. And this have an impact on the overall survival. That means that today, this progression during PARP can have an impact on the first subsequent therapy, but on all the life of your patient. And is there any second chance for PARP after PARP? You remember that the OREO trial also was a positive trial in terms of statistical results. The clinically results are not so clinically meaningful, only 2 months benefit for the PFS. And so we are right now reluctant to reintroduce PARP after PARP. However, in the PAOLA-1 clinical trial, we also see patients who receive PARP after PARP in the olaparib arm. And what it is interesting to see is that we see a benefit for this patient to reintroduce PARP after PARP only if they did not progress during PARP. And it is why we will start to recruit in the SOPHIA trial, which is an academic trial, who will explore PARP after PARP for patients who respond again to platinum-based chemotherapy. And the PARP who will be explored is a new PARP-1 selective, the saruparib, which is a new PARP compared to placebo. Which is interesting in this clinical trial is that the PARP will be added to BEV, yes or not. BEV is optional in this clinical trial. And we will explore a fixed maintenance therapy with only 2 years in the relapse setting compared to use PARP inhibitor until progression, which is, I'm thinking, a very important question to address in the future. So my conclusion before to open the door to the discussion, and we will have time for that, is that I hope I demonstrate to you that maintenance therapy should be proposed to all our patients in the first-line setting. All PARP inhibitors report positive, clinically meaningful improvement for PFS in the TBRCA HRD population, and an overall survival benefit were observed considering SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1. This is a clinically relevant benefit in PAOLA-1. Also, the PARP inhibitor were used in the relapse setting for the patient in the placebo arm. And we have to remember that in PAOLA-1, it's not a placebo in the control arm. It is an active control arm. I would like to remember how it's complex to observe overall survival benefit in the advanced ovarian cancer first-line setting. Remember that we need a meta-analysis to confirm that platinum-based chemotherapy is a positive impact on overall survival, and Bev alone had never been able to make the demonstration except in some subgroup. With all these different options available, monotherapy and combination, adding the HRD test available, we are now in the landscape where a personalized medicine is open in the high-grade serous ovarian cancer population, and we have to be very proud of that. The future question in the first line HRD population will be to discriminate good prognostic and poor prognostic, to adjust the standard of care, and it is a topic I will address in the next session later. For the relapse setting, we have observed two populations now, the population who progress during PARP, where perhaps the platinum-based chemotherapy will not be our standard of care for a long time, and we will start new trial exploring new options in the future. And in the other hand, the patient who did not progress during maintenance with PARP inhibitor, who receive again platinum-based chemotherapy, exploring to re-challenge with PARP is something that we have to do, adding the fact that PARP inhibitor is an oral treatment with few side effects and could be a good compromise compared to alternative maintenance therapy we would like to discuss in the future. So thank you so much for your attention, and it's time to discuss with all the three.
Thank you very much. So we can ask questions from the audience. I will start with my questions. So we use maintenance. This is something that is now standardized. In patients with BRCA mutation, is there something else from the BRCA mutation that will help you to guide the decision of using maintenance with olaparib or niraparib monotherapy, or that will guide you to use the combination with olaparib and bevacizumab?
This is the question every week at the Multidisciplinary Tumor Board. The point is that in my center, as we have an expert center, we receive a majority of the complex cases. And honestly, we have only 30% of our patients with a PCI able to move to upfront surgery. That means that 70% of our patients are candidates to receive neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And in France, looking to what we have seen with PAOLA-1, we consider that these patients are candidates to BEV, whatever is the molecular profile. So that means that these patients with neoadjuvant chemotherapy are candidates to receive the PAOLA-1 regimen. For the patient who receive upfront surgery, the question for us remains open. And it is for this reason that we have the Nirvana trial who explored the question. It's not with olaparib, it's with niraparib, but the patients were randomized to receive chemotherapy plus BEV, followed by BEV plus niraparib, versus chemotherapy alone, followed by niraparib. I think we will close the recruitment next year, and I hope that 2 years later or 3 years later, we will be able at least to report the PFS rate. So in practice, what we are doing when the patients are not able to be included in the clinical trial, in this case, it's exactly what you mentioned. We move in the detail. We look at which kind of BRCA mutation, BRCA1 versus BRCA2, but also the localization and the type of the mutation. And we use this. I'm not sure we have strong enough level of evidence to do that, but this is something that we use to try to figure out if we have to use the PARP alone or in combination with BEV.
So this post hoc analysis from Paola Juan are really
Yes.
interesting. And we do look at where the domain of the mutation is. And we do see that patients that were supposed to do beautifully just with the interval chemotherapy at 3 cycles, if they have BRCA mutation in the middle portion, these middle exons, they do not respond as well to platinums. So we were expecting these BRCA mutated patients to do very well, and we do not see a biochemical response in the Kellman score, and we are not seeing decreases in the clinical radiological assessment. So we do believe these patients have a better prognosis when add the bevacizumab. And also now that we have the Jesus score, do you use it as well? Do you think that patients that have a Jesus score before 60 are the ones that do really, really well? And then in those patients, would you just use monotherapy, or in patients that have the middle from 42 to 60, which is really,
Yes.
we know this is a spectrum, it's not just a point card.
We have to be careful. Where it is very complex, but it is always the same in oncology, is to make the difference between prognostic value and predictive value. And in the neoadjuvant setting, for example, when you see a marvelous response to chemo, you can anticipate that this patient could be very well sensitive to PARP, for sure. But in the other hand, do not forget that the prognostic of this disease is worse than the patient who receive upfront surgery. And this is why we did not desescalate right now to consider that a good response to platinum-based chemotherapy in the neoadjuvant setting is enough to avoid BEV. And we consider to continue to use the combination also in the BRCA mutated population or in the HRD positive population. Considering the HRD test, I will speak in the next session. You're right, we publish in Paola Juan a magnitude of the benefit in the BRCA mutated population much higher if the patient has a BRCA mutation and an HRD score more than 67 compared to 42. However, again, in this group, the patient received PARP and BEV, not only PARP. So using this data to consider to exclude BEV and say, okay, we have the good prognostic is not enough right now. So that means that we need collectively to prospectively collect all the information you use every day to select the combination or the monotherapy and to report the data in the literature to see if what we are looking in the subgroup analysis continue to be the reality in the real world, particularly when we exclude BEV. Because right now, all this data were coming with the combination and not the monotherapy. And also with all my colleagues, Antonio, Brad, we try to convince GSK to do this analysis in the PRIMA. We were not able to see the data until now. So it's really important in your daily practice to remember that it is subgroup analysis in a group of patients who receive the combination, not the monotherapy.
In terms of duration, so since the time we got approved Paola Juan, we're seeing patients now that are coming to this end of the 2-year treatment. The SOLO-1 trial led the investigator to choose if it continued the olaparib or not. This is not in the Paola Juan trial. What do? Do you stop BEV and EPARP all the same? Do you have patients based on clinical or type of mutations where you consider to continue giving the PARP inhibitor in Paola Juan?
It's not exactly true what you say. In Paola Juan, we also opened the door to continue the PARP inhibitor after 2 years if we have disease visible on the CT scan. And finally, there is only one patient who continue after 2 years. So that means that the decision is not only because of the protocol, it's also how the clinicians are looking to the disease. And between SOLO-1 and PAOLA-1, we also see in the relapse setting that the progression during PARP can impair the activity of the platinum-based chemotherapy before what we publish. And I'm pretty sure that this impact on the feeling of the clinician to decide to prolong or not the treatment. And because we don't see myelodysplasia and leukemia with a fixed maintenance duration in first line, whatever is PAOLA-1, SOLO-1, PRIMA, and ATHENA, we are much more comfortable. So right now, I will not push to continue the PARP inhibitor until more than 2 years or 3 years if we are looking to the PRIMA data. And one of the points when we don't see overall survival in PRIMA is perhaps because close to 90% or 80% of the patients progress on PARP. And perhaps this impairs the activity of the next line of treatment and can impair the overall survival benefit. So for this reason, and because we have now a new option available in the relapse setting, I don't speak only about BEV or new trial exploring EDC, but the SOPHIA trial, I think it's time also for us clinicians to consider the quality of life of the patient, and having some treatment-free holiday is something that the patient really appreciates. So we have to balance, and the patient preference is something that we need also to discuss with them.
In the HRD wild-type, BRCA wild-type population, is there anything besides the clinical risk, given the patients that were more unfavorable in PRIMA versus PAOLA-1, that leads you to decide one or the other?
I think that if I look at the multidisciplinary tumor board of my institution or what we are discussing with the colleagues, in fact, the combination is always the first choice. However, we know that there is several contraindications to BEV. Looking to the digestive surgery, looking to any thromboembolic event. So that means that at least in France, the majority of the patients receive the combination. And for those where BEV is not possible, we move to the PARP inhibitor alone.
And the difficult one, what about the proficient patients? So I think it's very unfair that we compare the results of the ICON-7 and GOG 218 with the results of the proficient population in PRIMA, because we do not know what patients had mutations in the GOG 218 and the ICON-7. So it's really unfair that we compare those 16 to 18 months of the maintenance with BEV in those patients with the nearly 8 months that we have in the proficient patients of the PRIMA. What do you choose for proficient patients?
You're right for the GOG, but in PAOLA-1, in the HRD negative population, we also observe 16 months.
Yeah.
So that means that also we have stratified on the BRCA mutated population and subgroup analysis in the HRD. We see some similar results. And honestly, the same, the majority of our patients, at least in Europe, in the HRD negative population, the first choice is BEV. And we select the PARP inhibitor in 2 groups of patients, the patients who are not able to receive BEV, but also we need to add the patient with a very good response to platinum-based chemotherapy. And we estimate that we have 5% of the patients in this group of patients we receive a PARP inhibitor as a maintenance treatment. Why? Because we know also that 90% of them will progress during PARP.
Last question. You talked to us about the ongoing trial of PARP after PARP. We also have very interesting data on ADCs coming. So I don't think this will be available for us very, very soon. We do have maybe MIRV coming soon. But in real world practice, if you had the chance, what is your time frame to say, I will re-challenge with an EPARP? What time frame from the relapse, from the time they use it?
In the real-life data, because we don't know about the safety, and we have to be honest, these patients already receive 2 lines of platinum-based chemotherapy plus at least 2 years of PARP inhibitor in the first-line setting. We are not using PARP after PARP. We prefer to include the patient in all these clinical trials you are speaking, exploring new options in the relapse setting, including EDC, but not only EDC. However, when SOPHIA will be open, I think it's really interesting because these patients did not progress during PARP. That means they progress at least 2 years after the platinum-based chemotherapy. They receive platinum-based chemotherapy with nice response, partial or complete response. And if there is in the future EDC, it will be interesting for this patient to manage and to balance an EDC every 3 weeks with side effect and an oral treatment with also side effect, but not exactly the same. And saruparib is a PARP selective, so I hope we will see less toxicity than we have seen with the first generation of PARP inhibitor. And the second point is that in this trial, we have a fixed maintenance therapy of 2 years. That means that after 2 years, we can say to the patient, you can be free of treatment, which is also something that the patient more and more are interested to look at it. But it is a question of debate, and I'm sure that in the future we will have a lot of debate.
Well, thank you very much. I don't see any questions from the audience. It was really nice having this discussion with you. I think we all learned a lot about the maintenance field in the first-line setting. Vamos a retomar a las 2 de la tarde. Los esperamos nuevamente a todos. Muchísimas gracias por su estancia.